What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a video about Lord of the Rings War in the North Legacy Edition, which is certainly a mouthful of a title, but is in fact a sort of resurrection for the original game, which released back in 2011. Now, Aspyr dropped this out of the blue a couple of days ago. However, I did know about it slightly before that, as a couple of days before that shadow drop, they reached out and offered me a review key for it. And while that is how I'm bringing you this video, I was just not able to hit the embargo time on that. They caught me in the middle of a bunch of stuff, and it was in fact a shadow drop, so I had to postpone it a couple days. Nonetheless, I did want to take a look at it for a couple of reasons. Primarily being, if you know anything at all about the channel, I do love an obscure title brought back from the dead, especially ones that were certainly never critically acclaimed. To start with, probably the most important thing to know about this release, honestly, is that you may well imagine from the name and everything that this is a remaster or a remake, and that just doesn't appear to be the case. It seems like what this is actually, I would say, more of a re-release with a big patch, as it is pretty much the 2011 version with some important changes that I think certainly make it a little more playable and look a little bit better, but I think honestly calling it a remaster is a bit of a stretch. Now, one of the biggest changes they made in this action hack and slash title is that previously you couldn't freely swap between the three characters that are in your party. You could only do that in between like individual missions. Here you can do it whenever. You can also do things like micromanage their equipment, though this does seem to have had the odd knock-on effect of not being able to control some of their more general actions, even if you have more fine-tuned control over their actual progression. Either way, you can freely swap between Aerodin the Ranger, Farron the Dwarf, and Andriel the Elven Lore Master. So each of these guys represents a playstyle, has of course their own abilities and everything, but that also extends to exploration, and so playing each one of them has a bit of a different effect. Like for instance, Andriel can craft potions and dispel like illusions, that kind of thing. So there's plenty of reasons to want to switch between them, and now that's of course possible to do whenever. So outside of that, they also, it would seem like, upscaled all of the textures and stuff, which is how they made it look a little better, but the upscaling just seems to be that upscaling. Like they're not new textures or anything, at least as far as I can tell. But otherwise it looks like they dealt with the licensing issues and stuff, which I believe got this game pulled from the storefronts initially, like when those licenses expired. But that seems to be like the primary scope of the changes themselves. Let's go ahead and start with a couple of the problems, I would say. For starters, the ability to switch between all these characters ultimately means that you get access to the inventory for each individual one of them, but the thing is that is not a shared inventory, and the patches that they have added here do not seem to have given you a shared inventory, which means you are effectively managing three different inventories, and the things like the vendor screen, for instance, doesn't allow you to swap between characters. You have to manually swap between each one, then talk to the vendor, then sell everything, and it's honestly extraordinarily tedious. There's also the fact that the companions are constantly walking in front of you and getting you stuck on things, and you have to just kind of wait for them to get out of the way while you walk into them, because if you don't walk into them, they won't move. So to be clear, while they have certainly, I would say, made this game accessible, there are some problems that are definitely still hanging around. So just keep that in mind if this is something you want to buy. But other than that, let's talk about the rest of the game. So Lord of the Rings War in the North is, as you have certainly seen on screen, and I did mention once, a hack and slash title that puts you in the role of a trio of heroes dealing with one of Sauron's lieutenants, I guess you could say, Agandaur. Agandaur is amassing a force in the ruins of Fornost of like goblins and orcs, the usual assortment. And your job basically is to slow them down and cause them problems so the actual story of the Lord of the Rings can take place as we kind of handle this side adventure. We won't be alone, even beyond our just regular companions. We're also going to meet up with characters from the book series. Gandalf's in here, I believe. Frodo's in there at one point, I know. And so this story sort of runs concurrently to like the beginning of the main story, as we keep Agandaur busy so he can't, of course, succeed in his nefarious plans. Now, while we do have our three companions, there are some progression things to note just more generally. So the usual stuff of questing and defeating enemies will get you experience, which then levels you up, that you can spend on attributes to increase your attributes, or you can let the game auto-assign them. This will increase your secondary stats, and then each level you get a skill point to put into your skill trees, which let you focus in on an aspect aspect of what that character is good at. Beyond that, there is equipment as well. You can put on potentially different sets, which give various bonuses, and then in combination with the skill tree, give you access to different things you can do with each character's playstyle, and that is in addition to environmental things like the game's good old-fashioned turret sections, which we don't really see anymore, so that was fun enough. But you'll notice that I did mention quests there. So structurally, the way this game works is that each chapter sees you operating out of a hub of sorts. The hub gives you access to all of the NPCs who can do things like give you quests or provide you services. However, when you are not in that hub, you are going to be taking the action to various missions, which are relatively short and linear, and usually at the end of not necessarily every single one, but some of them, you get the option to access a vendor or head back to town and talk to everybody. So it feels a little more open than it actually is, but given the type of game that it is, I think it actually works pretty well. When you are in those missions, depending on which character you have control of at the time, you'll be able to do things like, again, craft potions or detect secrets, that kind of stuff, and that exploration element adds a little bit of extra flavor to what is otherwise a pretty straightforward hack and slash. So each character has their strengths. We have our caster, our tank, our DPS, and we're going to try to use them to maximum effect against a massive amount of orcs, goblins, and all sorts of other things such as trolls and barrow wights. And while some of that is very straightforward, some of it is interesting in the sense that they try to make the battles a little more complicated by introducing elements of, say, suiciders, enemies who need to be killed with a ranged attack before they can blow up in your face. Those guys get to be excessive at times, and those are usually coupled with swarms of melee enemies that makes it hard to target those guys before they show up, and then sometimes the terrain itself plays into it, and that's to say nothing of the boss fights with things like the trolls, etc. that you'll be running into. So they did some fun stuff there to keep that hacking and slashing relatively interesting, at least as far as I have played thus far. But what I've enjoyed so far is actually the war machines and your eagle. So outside of the really basic stuff, you can occasionally get access to things like turrets for those turret sections, which is such a fun blast from the past. You really don't see a good old-fashioned turret section anymore, outside of that indie game that released recently where that's the whole focus is operating a giant turret. But even that functions a bit differently, I would say. So a good hit of nostalgia if that's your thing, I suppose. But the other thing is the eagle. So pretty early on, you free an eagle who agrees to help you with everything you've got going on, and this actually does have a game mechanic associated with it. When this is not on cooldown and you have the associated item, which is an eagle feather, you can call down the eagle, and this has a surprising amount of applications, so you can use this on, say, enemies themselves who are using a turret in the back and kind of disable that. Occasionally, enemies will throw up barriers that block ranged attacks that your eagle friend can get through pretty easily. Depending on the exact enemy you instruct the eagle to hit, it can actually do things like take out towers that archers are standing on, even like knock the whole thing down. However, as you would imagine, given the fact that it's an eagle, it doesn't really possess the ability to help you when the missions are indoors, but a fun little addition otherwise. Now, honestly, I would say that's most of the important things to know about Lord of the Rings War in the North here. I suppose I should also throw in here somewhere that you can play the game co-op with up to 2 other people controlling the other characters. But mostly, I'd say everything about this edition just seems to be aimed at making this game accessible in a way that was not previously. And for that, they are charging about $20 for it, which seems okay to me personally, but I didn't pay for it, to be clear. But from where I'm standing, this just seems like a fun trip down memory lane. I'm enjoying it. I will probably wrap this up and finish it on my own. However, I do not plan to put out a review for this. It really wouldn't be that much different from this video, and I would say this video contains the important stuff to know. However, I have enjoyed it enough that I do plan on running through it, as I have like a weird amount of time over the next few days, but that's neither here nor there, because that is going to do it for this particular video. So certainly hope you enjoyed it. If you're playing this for yourself, I would love to know what you think about it down in the comment section below, which of course means to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.